The first time my sister saw me in uniform was in an interrogation room. I'm Aaron Scott, and I was standing behind a sheet of one-way glass, arms folded, eyes locked on the woman sitting at the metal table. Two military police officers had just unshackled her wrists. She rubbed them like this was all some inconvenience she didn't deserve. Sophia Langford had always been untouchable in our family, every dinner table a stage for her, every conversation a performance. I used to watch her win over a room with that easy laugh, the same one she tried on the MPs as they left her alone. It didn't work here. On the table between us sat a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside was a birthday package she'd mailed to me 2 days ago, wrapped in loud paper, tied with a perfect bow, and addressed to my secure base mailbox. The handwriting was hers. The phrase on the label was hers, too. It was also the reason she was now in federal custody. I'd read those 5 words 100 times before. But this time, they didn't sting like a sister's joke. They triggered a level 4 security alert across an entire intelligence facility, and she still didn't know that the person deciding what happened to her next wasn't some faceless investigator. It was me. That morning had been like any other quiet hum of servers in the background, muted voices in the hallway, the low scent of burnt coffee drifting in from the break room. I'd been scanning a report at my desk, eyes fixed on a string of intercepted transmissions, when a knock sounded on the doorframe. "Mail for you." "Scott," the clerk said, holding up a box so bright it looked like it had been stolen from a toy store. The paper was a chaotic swirl of pink and gold, tied off with a satin ribbon. Even from my seat, I could see the flourish in the handwriting on the label. I was halfway out of my chair when a shadow fell across the desk. "Step back," came the low voice of Colonel Patrick O'Neill. The easygoing tone he sometimes carried was gone. In its place was something flat, heavy in order, with no room for interpretation. I froze mid-step. "Sir," he didn't answer. He only pointed to the label, one finger steady as stone. My eyes followed, and the flicker of warmth I'd felt at the sight of that package drained away. 5 words stared back at me, written in Sophia's looping script, from your favorite little spy. In another life, one without clearance levels and code words, maybe it could have been funny. But here, in a secure signals intelligence hub, those words weren't a joke. They were a match thrown onto dry grass. O'Neill didn't waste time. He lifted the box without ceremony, his gloves already on, and signaled to the security officer in the hall. The package was gone in seconds, disappearing into the chain of custody process that meant it would be scanned, swabbed, X-rayed, and documented down to the last fiber of ribbon. I stood there, hands idle at my sides, feeling the weight of the room shift. "Colonel, she doesn't—" I stopped myself. He turned toward me, his expression unreadable. "We both know intent isn't the point, Lieutenant." My title was still new, barely a month old, and hearing it in that clipped tone brought a kind of clarity I hadn't expected. This wasn't about my sister's sense of humor. It was about protocol, and once a system like ours moved into motion, there was no casual way to stop it. The truth settled in with a cold finality. Sophia had no idea what she'd set in motion, or that I was about to make sure she experienced every inch of it. There's a strange kind of double life you learn to live in this field. In one world, I'm Aaron Scott, the quiet daughter at the family table, a footnote in conversations dominated by Sophia's latest campaign or magazine feature. In the other, I'm Lieutenant Scott, tasked with scanning data streams for patterns that could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe, the two worlds never touched until now. The last time I saw my family before that package arrived was over Christmas. The house smelled like cinnamon and cloves, music drifting in from the living room. Sophia had been holding court, her phone angled just right as she filmed herself telling some story about getting a soda company's hashtag trending in under an hour. My parents leaned in, smiling like they were front row at a Broadway show. I'd waited until the noise died down to mention I'd scored in the top percentile on a cryptologic aptitude assessment, a test that takes most people weeks to even pass. The pause was brief, polite. My father gave a distracted nod and said, "That's nice. honey. But you know what really makes a difference? Results you can see. And just like that, my world vanished from theirs again. In my real world, there's no applause, just the steady thrum of encrypted data scrolling across a monitor, the static hiss in a headset as you listen for anomalies. Weeks before that Christmas, I'd caught a subtle, almost imperceptible jitter in a transmission from a high-threat region. Most analysts would have brushed it off as noise. I knew better. Within minutes, I'd traced the intrusion and flagged it, writing a report that went straight to Colonel O'Neill's desk. He'd appeared at my workstation, tablet in hand, scanning my notes without a word. When he finally looked at me, there was a flicker of something I'd never seen from my family respect. "Good catch. Echo 12, he'd said. No pat on the hand, no backhanded compliment, just a clear acknowledgement that my work mattered. And now, thanks to Sophia's package, the gap between those two worlds was closing hard. She thought she was mailing me a joke, something to remind me I'd never be as important as she was. What she didn't know was that the system she'd tripped didn't care about family. And neither, anymore, did I. By the time the package cleared its initial scans, the base was already under a restricted movement order. Doors that usually swung open with a badge now required double authentication. Security teams moved in pairs. Conversations dropped when I walked past. Colonel O'Neill called me into a briefing room, the kind with no windows and a single camera in the corner. The package sat in the middle of the table, now sealed in a transparent evidence bag, its cheerful wrapping looking absurd under the harsh overhead light. He didn't waste time. "Here's the situation." That phrase, paired with the address, triggered Red Alert protocol. The system assumes hostile intent until proven otherwise. I nodded, though my chest tightened. Red Alert wasn't a suggestion, it was a mandate. Once engaged, it pulled resources from multiple agencies, ran deep-dive background checks, and initiated mandatory interviews with the sender. O'Neill leaned back, studying me. "I can classify this as a non-credible domestic incident. The report disappears. No one has to know. It was the kind of lifeline most people would grab without hesitation. Bury it. Protect the family from embarrassment. And move on." But I didn't move. The years of being minimized, dismissed, erased, they rose up all at once. Every moment I'd swallowed my pride to keep the piece lined up like evidence in my mind. "She'll never understand if we make this vanish," I said finally. His gaze held mine, weighing the words. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir." The process was triggered by data, not opinion. "We finish it." He gave a slow nod, the decision settling between us like a signed order. "Then you'll compile the preliminary investigation file." "You know the drill." I did. I sat at a secure terminal and began feeding the system every open-source detail about Sophia, her job, her social media activity, every post where she'd called me her little spy. I wasn't inventing anything. I was simply holding a mirror up to her own trail of carelessness. When I hit submit, I knew it wasn't about revenge. It was about letting her feel, for once, the weight of consequences, a currency she'd never had to pay in before. And soon, she would. 2 days later, the chain of custody ended in a place most civilians never see. Interrogation Room 3 was a perfect gray box, no windows, no clock, no comfort. The air was still, the kind of stillness that pressed against your skin. I watched from the observation room as 2 military police officers brought Sophia in. She still wore the sleek navy dress I'd last seen in her holiday posts, hair perfectly smoothed, heels clicking like she was arriving at a press event. She sat down with practiced poise, crossed her legs, and waited. The MPs left, and the heavy door clicked shut. She glanced at the mirrored wall, not realizing I was behind it. I knew that look, calculating, rehearsing her lines, deciding which charm to deploy first. She thought this was a misunderstanding, and that soon some middle manager in uniform would apologize for the inconvenience. The door opened, and Colonel O'Neill stepped in. His posture was a wall in itself, straight back, squared shoulders, eyes locked on her without a flicker of warmth. He didn't sit. "Sophia Langford," he began, voice clipped. You are the sender of a package that triggered a Level 4 security alert at this facility. She laughed, short and sharp. It was a birthday gift for my sister. This is ridiculous. O'Neill didn't acknowledge the interruption. The package contained a phrase used by a known foreign intelligence network to initiate contact with compromised assets. Her smile faltered. It's an inside joke. Ask Aaron. He didn't glance toward the glass. Our concern is determining whether you acted under coercion, as a willing participant, or out of reckless disregard. Those terms coercion, willing participant were the language of treason charges. I saw the moment the meaning landed. Her shoulders stiffened, the color draining from her face. And then, as if on cue, O'Neill stepped aside. The door opened again. I walked in. The uniform fit perfectly, every ribbon aligned, insignia catching the light. In my hand, a thick folder stamped classified. I stopped beside O'Neill, facing her directly for the first time in months. Her eyes widened, recognition flooding in and with it, something new, fear. I didn't sit. The chair across from her stayed empty, a deliberate absence. Sir, I said to O'Neill, my voice steady. Preliminary threat assessment on the individual is complete. I let the formality hang there. Individual, not Sophia. She blinked, her gaze bouncing between us. Aaron, this is insane. Tell them it's a mistake. I opened the folder, sliding a single page forward so it rested at the center of the table. The phrase you wrote on that package. I began. My tone clinical. Matches a recognition signal used by a foreign sleeper cell we've been tracking for 18 months. It's deployed to confirm a compromised asset. Her mouth opened, then closed. It was a joke. I've called you that for years. In this environment, jokes like that pull agents from the field. I replied, your package, sent to this secure address at this specific time, nearly collapsed an active operation. It forced us to extract 3 undercover officers from hostile territory. Her hands fidgeted in her lap now, fingers twisting the edge of her dress. O'Neill stepped in. Lieutenant Scott is the lead analyst for the division you're currently under investigation by. She put your name in that report herself, because it was her duty. That was the breaking point. I saw it in her eyes the moment the hierarchy shifted, when the years she'd spent brushing me aside crumbled under the reality of where we both stood now. You're enjoying this, she said quietly, but there was no conviction behind it. No, I said, just as quiet. I'm making sure you understand that actions have consequences, something you've managed to avoid your entire life. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the ventilation filled the room, a reminder that this was my arena, not hers. O'Neill closed the folder and signaled to the MPs outside. We're done here for now. They entered without a word, one at each side of her chair. Sophia looked at me like she wanted to speak an apology, an excuse, maybe both, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned away first. 6 hours later, the door to interrogation room. 3 opened again. Sophia stepped out, looking nothing like the woman who had strutted in that morning. Her makeup had smudged, her hair had lost its polished wave, and in her hands she clutched 2 envelopes, one a national security letter, the other a non-disclosure agreement that would bind her to silence for the rest of her life. She scanned the corridor until her eyes found me. I was standing at the far end, discussing satellite data with 2 analysts from my team. She took a tentative step forward, parting her lips to speak. I met her gaze for a single, cool second. Then, I gave the smallest nod a dismissal and turned back to my colleagues without breaking stride. Her footsteps didn't follow. That night, the base settled into its usual rhythm. My desk light cast a pool of gold over mission briefs, the hum of electronics almost comforting. Yet I could still picture Sophia in that hallway, stripped of her confidence. No audience to charm, no easy way out. In the weeks that followed, the investigation concluded exactly as I knew it would, no criminal charges, but a permanent file noting her as a potential security risk. The system had done its job, and I had done mine. 6 months later, I stood in the secure auditorium. the rank on my shoulders, now officially lieutenant. Before me sat a room of new intelligence analysts, their notebooks open, pens ready. On the screen behind me was a case study labeled simply Domestic Origin Anomaly, Case 91A. I walked them through it step by step, not as a personal grievance, but as an example of why vigilance matters. I spoke of how a careless phrase on a package could derail an operation, how our duty doesn't bend for personal relationships. When I finished, Colonel O'Neill was waiting at the back. "Well done, Lieutenant," he said. The praise was simple, direct, and worth more to me than any hollow compliment I'd ever chased from my family. I realized then that I'd stopped needing their approval. My respect, my place in the world, it was already mine. It was late on a Tuesday when her name appeared in my inbox. Subject line, "I'm sorry." For a moment, I just stared at it. Months ago, those words would have set my pulse racing. I would have clicked instantly, desperate to read them, to believe them. Now, I opened it with the same detachment I used for a field report. The email was long, nearly a wall of text. Sophia wrote about how she'd never known what I really did, how the joke was harmless in her mind, how the investigation had ruined her standing at work. She apologized for what happened to her, for the way our parents were devastated. I skimmed the first few lines before my hand moved to the mouse. Without a second thought, I archived it. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. I'd spent years trying to earn recognition from people who had no interest in seeing me. The ledger between us was closed, paid in full. The next morning, sunlight cut sharp lines across my desk as I reviewed a new batch of intelligence feeds. My team moved in quiet efficiency, every conversation purposeful. This was my family now, a community bound not by blood, but by trust and shared responsibility. A week later, I found myself walking the perimeter of the base in the cool evening air, past the comms building, past the motor pool, all the way to the observation deck where the stars stretched, bright and cold, over the horizon. I leaned on the railing, letting the silence settle. I thought about the package, about the look in Sophia's eyes when she realized I wasn't the one in trouble, and for the first time, there was no anger left in it for me, just a sense of finality. She had sent a gift to remind me who she thought I was. Instead, she'd been forced to see who I'd become. And maybe that was the only gift I'd ever needed from her. When I finally turned back toward the barracks, the night felt lighter. The air was sharp, clean. Somewhere in the distance, a security light blinked in a steady, precise rhythm, just like the work we do. Constant, uncompromising, unseen by most. Exactly where I belonged. 3 weeks after I archived Sophia's email, I found myself in my new office, a space with a wide window overlooking the entire complex. From here, I could see the guarded gate, the communications tower, and the training field where new recruits were running drills under the pale morning sun. It was the kind of vantage point I'd never imagined having when I first walked onto this base years ago. The desk held only what I needed: a mission binder, my encrypted laptop, and a small wooden box. Inside that box was the only family keepsake I'd chosen to bring: a brass compass from my grandfather. The man who taught me that direction mattered more than speed. The needle still swung steady every time I opened it, a quiet reminder that my path was my own to set. My days were fuller now, layered with responsibilities that didn't leave space for the old doubts that used to eat at me. I was writing operational plans, mentoring analysts, sitting in on briefings that shaped the scope of our work for months ahead. People sought my judgment, not because of my name, but because I had earned my place here. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a debrief with 2 junior officers, a message popped onto my secure line. It was from Colonel O'Neill briefing at 1400. Bring case 91A. We met in a closed conference room. He wanted me to present the case to a visiting oversight committee: senators, senior defense officials, people whose faces most of America only sees on news broadcasts. They listened intently as I laid out the sequence, the package, the trigger phrase, the protocol, the resolution. When I finished, One of the senators asked if it was difficult to follow through on a case involving a family member. I answered truthfully, the difficulty isn't in doing what's right, it's in accepting that doing what's right may cost you people you thought you needed. The room was quiet for a beat before the senator nodded, his expression unreadable but respectful. Later, walking back to my office, I thought about that question. It wasn't about family or work, it was about integrity. And integrity, once compromised, is far harder to recover than any relationship. I don't know if Sophia will ever understand that. We haven't spoken since the investigation closed, but I know she's aware now that there's a line she can't cross without consequences. Standing at my window, watching the late afternoon sun slant across the training field, I realized something simple. I no longer needed the people who once withheld their approval like it was currency. I had my own ledger now, measured in trust earned, missions completed, and the quiet certainty of having done my job without compromise. That's the thing about living in two worlds eventually. You choose one, and I chose mine.